Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar. We'll be talking a little bit today about mobile addressability in an iOS 14.5 world. I think we're actually up now into an iOS 14.7 world, but we all know what that's about. And really we're going to be discussing today is what publishers need to know about iPhone identity and really mobile identity going forward. On all of this. Very, very timely topic. And our webinar is being sponsored by InMobi. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I'm just going to take a few minutes here and make sure that everyone knows what to expect from our webinar today and is also familiar with all the features of our webinar platform. Our presentation is going to be mostly, of course, a panel discussion with our speakers on video, so expect that, and it should go somewhere in the 35-minute range. And after that, we are going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during the conversation, if you have a question for our speakers, just use the question tool that you should see there underneath the video window right now. So use that to submit your question, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can following the panel discussion. It's not too late to invite your colleagues to come and join us today, and we'd really love it if they would. About 15 minutes ago, we sent you a final reminder email. In there, you're going to find a link over to the registration page, so grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. Again, they still have plenty of time to come on in, register, and join us live. If they can't make it live, no need to panic. Our webinar today is being recorded. It will be available on demand. We're going to send everybody who's registered, so everyone in attendance today, certainly, a link to that on-demand version later this afternoon. So check your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock New York time. You will have that link in hand. Usually we make our slides available. Honestly, it's a title slide and a speaker slide, so we don't really have that, so no need to be concerned there. So I do just want to jump ahead and just say again, we always urge everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars. Great place to really keep up with what we have coming up. And we're doing 3 webinars a week these days, so see what's up there. All different topics. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. Plenty of things related to mobile, related to social, related to the cookieless future and privacy, and really agency operations. You name it, there's a webinar up there for you. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. You'll also get full access to our entire archive of on-demand webinars. Every webinar we've done over the past year, that includes at least one other from our sponsors today at InMobi. So keep an eye out for that. So let me just move on here and introduce our speakers pretty quickly for everyone. So again, we've got a really, really terrific panel today. And again, we've got Scott Roney. Scott is the VP of Publisher Business Development over at LiveRamp, where he oversees, obviously, the BD organization for publishers, and he's responsible for driving the accelerated adoption of LiveRamp's authenticated traffic solution, really, again, helping publishers grow revenue streams, optimize yield, demonstrate marketing value. We know how important that is. From the publisher side, we're very happy to have Rick Welch. Rick is the VP and head of programmatic over at Flipboard. Again, an ad tech executive and digital media sales leader with over nearly 2 decades of experience, responsible for formulating the strategies in data, digital media sales, and really all aspects of programmatic trading over at Flipboard. From our sponsors at InMobi, we have TK Krishnamurti, who's the VP of Customer Success. Again, TK is a passionate leader, really hands-on technical experience working with customers and partners to deliver successful results and growth. And our panel is going to be moderated today by Cecilia Enzao, who's a senior product marketing manager, again, experienced with product marketing and with a demonstrated history of working with the marketing and advertising industry. So let me make this necessary transition to bring all of our speakers up on screen. So bear with me here 1 second while I make this happen. And over you to begin our webinar, Cecilia. And welcome, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Stuart. Very glad to be here with you all today and to be hosting this discussion. So today we're here to reflect on what mobile publishers need to know about identity and addressability in an iOS 14 world. So let's dive right into it. So we all know that obviously iOS 14.5 has been live for just about 4 months today. And since it was announced in late 2020, it's certainly been a candidate for perhaps being the most used words in the mobile industry, after perhaps the famous "you are on mute," and fairly so. So whilst it's been a slow rollout at first, the 14.6 version certainly made things pick up and clear and made a very clear pictures of how things are now. So from opt-in trends to monetization strategies, there is a lot to unpack, and that's why we're here today. So to start the conversation, I would be curious to hear from all of you, Rick, Scott, and TK, on what you think are the biggest challenges that publishers now face as a result of iOS 14.
Sure. I'll jump in first. I think that the most obvious ones are a decreased fill rate, right? Decreased effective CPMs, and then an even stronger need for a robust first-party data solution offering, collection strategy, whatever, if you don't already have one. And then probably lastly, getting on the dev queue for integrating potentially multiple solutions. While I don't think they're necessarily a huge lift, a company like ours, we are strapped for engineering and product resources, and it's kind of always been that way, right? We're not Pinterest, we're not Facebook, we don't have an army of engineers. So I want to work with multiple solutions. So kind of, getting that on the dev roadmap is another challenge. So I think you got a bunch of different things going on there, at least from my perspective.
Nice. Yeah. And I think the thing that I'd add there, and this is what we're seeing with lots of publishers and throughout the entire industry, both in terms of display and in an app, is it's all about trust, right? We need to make sure that publishers are going to honor the choices that the consumers are making, right? And so when the users raise their hand and say, "Yep, it's okay for you to track me," right? Publishers can't break that trust, right? And if that happens and they find out that their data is being used for purposes that they didn't sign up for, they're going to opt out, and in large part, you're never going to get them back. And then that mindset is going to perpetuate to the next experience that they're having with another publisher. And then suddenly you got this like bad situation where everybody's like, "I don't want to share my data." So that trust factor is super important. What we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, adding on to what Rick and Scott said, right? I mean, definitely, I totally appreciate what Rick said. When we work with multiple publishers, that dev pressure comes out. Like, you now have to bring one more aspect into the picture. But at the end of the day, I think, what publishers are dealing with, especially those that kind of woke up late, is the impact to revenue, obviously, as identity went away. And now, to what Scott said, everything is about privacy first. Now, as it comes to talking about identity and user, and that becomes the kind of front and center. Another aspect that also has become challenging for publishers is in the user acquisition line. Definitely, having to make sure that they have more consented users and acquire more users. So definitely the challenge is kind of multifold. But the good news is I think there is kind of some clear-cut avenues where they can address this.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that, sorry, Cecilia, just real quick. So kind of feeding off of that whole trust aspect, the other thing that consumers are looking for is like when they actually do sign up and give their data to a publisher, that they're actually going to get like a benefit. Like they're going to like see a user experience benefit, like personalized ads or maybe more access to better content or functionality, because it's all about like you're giving to get, right? And if you're doing that, on top of getting, consumers to share their data, then you're going to be able to share with advertisers, the people that are actually buying ads, the ability to personalize their story, to personalize their journey, because they know who this person is. So that's the other trust. Like, you need to make sure that you're delivering a better experience and that you're responding to the privacy choices that they've made.
Definitely, all great points, especially on the value exchange, which we will get on later. But on the revenue impact, I think it's quite important just to explore that a little bit. So it's clear that there's been revenue impact across iOS and inventory, and I think what's important here is to understand what publishers can do to make up for that potential lost ad revenue. Scott, do you have some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, like, we've been working on this thing with a third-party cookie deprecation for like a number of years now. And really, it's this whole situation has been a catalyst for helping drive their first-party data strategies. So, like Rick mentioned that before, right? Like, how do you double down on making sure that not only am I asking for somebody to raise their hand and say, hey, give me a personalized experience from an ad perspective, but like, you have the opportunity now as a publisher to capture more first-party data, and then it'll feed your ability to build and execute your own marketing campaigns, your own customer engagement strategy, right? And so, so this has just been a huge catalyst for us as we're working with publishers to say, yeah, I feel like I need to double down on understanding who my customers are, because if you understand who your customers are, then you can help your advertisers also understand the value of the users that you have and the value of what happens when those advertisers reach those audiences on your platforms, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the cookie crumbling that's been happening, for quite some time now, showed me a few publishers who, were thinking ahead. And, I have a colleague over at the New York Times whose purview expanded just from your ad tech and programmatic into subscription strategies and other things like that, right? So just general diversification of your revenue streams as a company beyond, I know we're just talking about advertising and data here, but just really a need to diversify and have more revenue streams out there. And then I guess I'd say, secondly, what's old is new again in some capacity, right? I worked for Datalogix for 4 years, and I pushed third-party targeting and audience to death. And then I went to Condé Nast, and I had to flip that and kind of talk about context more. And I think leaning into contextual solutions is something that we are at Flipboard focused on doing as well, right? Again, so just two different types of diversification, I guess.
I would expand on the diversification and kind of bring in and say, hey, it's almost like a multi-pronged approach. We actually kind of put together a primer for how to tackle this, right? On one hand, contextual targeting, to what Rick says, it's going to be big, right? We were just starting to find the tip of that. You also have to think about, okay, if I have consented traffic, how do I enhance the value for that? Then you say, it's not that non-consented traffic is waste. You can build a strategy around it. You can segregate it and give that a view into the to the demand side and say, how do you take advantage of it? So you have to think about a comprehensive multi-pronged approach that brings all of it, right? You identify the strengths and then say, how do I adapt to this new world and bring in more value to the user, to your value exchange point that you talked about, and create the right partnership for each of this, right? And that becomes going to be the key for that.
Definitely. So obviously we're now spending time on looking at strategies and revenue diversification. But there's one thing that is definitely important is to also be able to package your inventory to make it more appealing for advertisers, obviously. So if we switch gear towards demand lens for a quick moment, what would you recommend for publishers' audience today to make their inventory more valuable and more appealing to advertisers? Perhaps, TK, you have an opinion, knowing that you work on the exchange side of things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what at the end of the day, DSPs want is an ability to identify, right? They want to be able to target, right? And doing that from a publisher lens, from a privacy first perspective, in terms of, again, to me, sitting in the ecosystem, right partnership is key between the publisher and people providing the right type of solution that can overlay on top of those publisher data. So that really is, how do I, in the privacy first world, what are my avenues that can enable creating their identity, and then clearly understanding what is my identifiable inventory and non-identifiable inventory, and segregating it and clearly associating a certain value to it and presenting that to the DSP is going to be one of the key aspects of how you think about your inventory, right? It's not just it's necessarily bad if it is not identifiable, it just becomes different if it's not identifiable. I know, Scott, Rick, what do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. I think the other thing that, we've been seeing, and obviously at LiveRamp, we're, focused on helping publishers come up with strategies to help them get as many people to opt in and get as many people to identify themselves as possible, because all of we monetize our business on the advertiser marketing side. So we help all marketers activate their data. And so what we're doing with the publishers is trying to figure out a way to get them an ID so marketers can buy, right? And so what can we do to help, with publishers' ability to ask for and be granted more people to raise their hands and say, yep, track me, because we're seeing, 40 to 300% increases in CPM for identifiable traffic. And so there's obviously like a strategy to maximize that, with also keeping in mind that there are contextual, strategies that you should pursue. There's also addressable strategies you should pursue, and lots of different ways to try to maximize that revenue and that yield, knowing that tons of budgets are going to Facebook and the walled gardens right now. And we want to make sure that we can peel back a lot of that budget and bring it back into open exchange. So, and marketers can continue to buy that they want to buy.
Yeah, I think for us, it's about getting back out into market, post-COVID as well, as much as possible, right? Speaking to both vendor partners, like we are here, for solutions to mitigate and alleviate the challenges. Speaking to our peers as much as possible. I think now more than ever, other apps and properties are willing to share information that they may not have been willing to before, at least in my experience. We're seeing super wide ranges. I don't know about everyone else here, but we're seeing super wide ranges of opt-in rates, anywhere from 5 to 20%. Obviously, the large platforms are getting much higher rates. So just emulating success of those on the high end of those ranges, whether it be, through testing new technology solutions, to testing, just A/B testing different dialogues with our customers, with our users rather. And, yeah, go ahead.
I love the testing element here, Rick. So how has it been going? Have you tested like different sort of languages, different sort of formats, different sort of prompts per user demographic? Be curious to hear a bit more about that.
I would personally enjoy more testing on our side, although Flipboard as a business is always very test-oriented. We're very user-oriented, so we always have 10% holdout groups for different messaging, for different features. So just applying a lot of what we do on the general product side to, this aspect or this data collection aspect. We haven't seen huge, fluctuations in our opt-in rates yet. But, we're going to keep trying. And like I said, I've downloaded, if I already didn't have them, every app who monetizes through ads and, on my phone. And I speak to all my peers, a lot of them were on a texting basis. So I would encourage that, collaboration across the industry, and just try and emulate, what's working. And also listening to your marketers and agencies, I think, on the what can we do to make our inventory more valuable. Obviously, I'm going to talk to these guys here, right? But also talking to marketers and advertisers and really understanding their KPIs, better. And the company always has a mantra of coming up with business solutions to technical challenges. And I think this is a great example of one of those scenarios. Where we're just going to have to get creative.
I think I can't emphasize on the testing aspect of what Rick just pointed out, right? I think it's not just in user consent alone. It's almost like a pipeline, right? You constantly think of ways to improve the user consent. And then the three of us are here talking about how we're going to constantly enhance the value of the consented traffic for sure. And then you constantly look at, what do I do with the unconsented traffic, right? Things like, can I bring in higher value ad formats? Can I package them? Can I think of other solutions like, our, InMobi's Unified is one of them, right? So but the front end of it, which I think, publishers like Rick are used to testing because they're constantly trying this out. But that's kind of the learning curve for a lot of new publishers saying, okay, now I have to invest in testing and try things out. And also there is a lot more alignment between various publishers sharing that what works and what doesn't work. That's good to see as well.
Yeah, one thing that is interesting to keep in mind is that we're all users at the end of the day. Like Rick, you said, you downloaded the apps, you looked at the opt-in, the prompts from various apps, and I think that's the right thing to do. I don't know about you, but when obviously the whole iOS 14 was released and I started getting the prompts, whenever it was too complicated or whenever it was quite long and sort of too serious, I thought to myself, okay, I'm working in industry, so I would understand what it is about. But for users that don't necessarily understand what it's about, I think simplification is also quite key here, which actually is quite bringing me to the next point about being users.
Yeah.
And, being consumers. There's one aspect which we touched on at the beginning. It's about the consumer and the value exchange. So how can publisher make sure that the user understand what they're getting in exchange of sharing their data? I think it is quite important to explore that topic a bit further.
Yeah, I believe Scott jumped on this one earlier. I'd love to hear from two platforms who see what everyone else is doing. Because I think I've said this a couple of times across different articles and panels we've done recently, and I keep hammering on user education and the value exchange and stuff like that. And I think the major platforms have very strong data collection. I think we can all agree, right? Their opt-in rates are very high. But I would say if you asked, someone who's outside of our industry, they're still not quite sure what they're getting, other than the fact that it's a platform they use all the time and that all their friends use, right? Like if it's Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, they're just going to say yes. But I don't think they really know what they're getting at the end of the day. It's tough for smaller platforms to do that education, right? Because we're strapped for education, we're strapped for resources rather. And we've looked to Google and a few others to kind of do this for us over the years, industry education, consumer education. But yeah, I think I personally still struggle with this. I talk about it and I say that it's important, but in execution, I do struggle with kind of how to make this happen. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts, but.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of the user experience and communicating with the user, obviously you need to be upfront and honest about like how their data is being used. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and this is something that we at LiveRamp run into a lot with publishers, is like, okay, so how can we help improve the user experience? And is it through like contests, or is it through newsletter subscriptions, or is it through enhanced content, or some sort of reg wall, or just little ways to like link the user experience to that value exchange are all really meaningful and have helped drive the opt-in rate, or in the case of on the web, somebody signing in and registering with their email address. But it's important, obviously, to communicate how they're going to use their data. But getting back to my earlier point, it's really important to make sure that we're communicating what value out of the user experience they're going to get in exchange for that.
I mean, listen, I think from a publisher platform perspective, right, we have always placed premium on user experience. We have been an SDK vendor, and the reason we have SDK adds value is in the user experience. Now that user experience have taken on a different dimension where we bring in transparency as a part of user experience, right? So to what Scott was saying, right, people now need to know, when I give this data, what am I getting in return, right? And that has become, it's not a tangential conversation that relates only to data. It's become a core conversation as it pertains to user experience. So we one of the things we try and do is we abstract what we hear from various publishers, right? We're not necessarily saying this publisher is doing it, that publisher is doing it, but have you thought about doing it this way? We kind of, because to us, publishers are the kind of the gateway into our user interaction, and we know that that user experience is critical for our publisher. So this is an ongoing conversation that has only enhanced in terms of what user experience becomes from our conversations with publishers, for sure.
I think, I guess one more piece that I just thought of, right, is you talk about newsletters, you talk about potential blog posts or whatever as means or channels for education, and that's something that we can and I think we'll push to do. But I look at traditional publishers who, we're a content aggregation and curation platform. We don't necessarily write articles outside of newsletters and blog posts, but I'll look to someone like New York Times or someone who has, serious influence in consumer education, and perhaps their tech editor could write something on this subject, right? Because the industry trades talk a ton about it, but we're the ones who read the industry trades. We already know this, right? It's about the general population, and so it's almost like we should encourage some of our major peers, who are the ones who have influence, Wash Post, LA Times, New York Times, people of that nature, to perhaps touch on this subject to reach a broader audience and educate them. I know WSJ has been doing it for years, right? The whole what they know kind of thing that when I was at Condé, I was cautioned to be careful what I said. That can be used, in less of a fear-mongering kind of capacity and more of an educational, what's best for you as a consumer capacity. Just a thought, I know that's a big ask, but
it's more of I think, Rick, your point is that this is a more mainstream conversation now and not just a quote unquote trade tech conversation, right? It affects all of us the way we kind of work. Yeah, totally agree.
It's a wild card question, but just wondering if you saw Social Dilemma or not on Netflix.
Oh, I saw it. It was fabulous. I saw it with my kids, and it was almost like we walked away thinking, "What in the world is going on?" Like I didn't even know what to do next. It was crazy. I don't know if you guys had the same experience, but it was sort of mind blowing to be sitting with I got a bunch of teenagers. I got 2 teenagers. actually 3 now, geez. 3 teenagers and a 10-year-old, and they're all kind of doing their phone. They're all kind of thinking about like how, their data and what they're sharing is going to be viewed and looked at and used and leveraged. It's just, it's pretty mind blowing.
Rick, TK, did you have a chance
Well,
to?
so I'm in a similar boat with Scott. I have 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old now. It kind of went from, one of the things is it kind of went from, I really don't care what I shared, because I always said, data is oil, right? And I say, just if you put it out there, somebody's going to read it. So don't put it out there if you don't want to read it, right? But then the awareness has become a lot more apparent and deliberate now than before. Being in the industry, I felt like that didn't touch upon as much as it could have to some extent as well. I was like, oh, they didn't talk about that one. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Interesting is the word I would use.
Yeah, I worked for a data company for 4 years, so I'm a bit biased. Like I've always been with all my friends saying, you're exaggerating, you're overblowing this, the situation. The internet isn't free, journalism isn't free. There's an exchange of value, but some of the stuff does border on, it's not just about propelling journalism. It's about trust and privacy. And I think not only do we need to be educating users on how the data fuels proper journalism and keeps us afloat, but how we're going to treat it responsibly. And I think, privacy is more important now than ever, and transparency. And we've always taken that very seriously over here, which is one of the things I like most about the Flipboard team. So yeah, I don't know. It didn't necessarily shock me, any of it. But again, that's because we're kind of on the inside. I'd be curious to listen to some others. My brother is, my younger brother, who I always looked at for trends in the industry, is now 25. But he's always been of the, I don't share anything. He's a big Redditor. So he's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. Like I give everything away. Data-wise, my brother gives nothing away. And so we kind of have this debate between the two of us. But yeah, it's interesting.
I like to use the word, the responsible way of doing it, right? I think that is the key, right? To me. I think a lot of us have been doing it. So it becomes an extension of, whether you talk about Flipboard or solutions that, we have been working with folks like LiveRamp or InMobi in terms of how we work with the publisher. Responsible way of consuming that is not something new. It has become more up at the forefront. Just like how I said, transparency is not something new to us, but it's now become part of a core user experience conversation. So, but I like the way you use that word, right? Is that it's a responsible way of doing certain things.
Yeah, I think we've always had to police. I mean, when the government started getting involved in our industry a couple of years back, right? I think we looked at ourselves and said we have to self-police or whatever. We have to keep each other in check, and I think that's true now more than ever, right? Because it only takes a few bad players, and I'll use this isn't a direct parallel because I don't think Rocket Fuel did anything wrong. But I do believe that when they went public and showed their margins, it sent ripple effects throughout the industry, right? About what people were taking percentage-wise. I think it only takes 1 or 2 bad players to do something with the data that's irresponsible, and it obviously affects all of us. So, I think that self-policing is important in calling out the bad actors because, the peers that I talk to, a few different, weather players, ourselves, a few other content aggregators like us, we're all very cautious with how we collect and what we collect, almost from a revenue generation individual, almost frustratingly so, to the point where, it took me years to convince us to do geolocation collection and things like that people have been doing forever. So while I appreciate our obsession with the user experience, it's challenging sometimes when I'm trying to earn money, but I'd rather err on the side of caution and self-police our peers.
Definitely. And while we touch on this, and perhaps we could end on one last practical, more so question/answer. We talked a lot about data collection, and when you have data, how do you make it addressable in a privacy-friendly way? And now there's in the industry so many companies creating or offering ID solutions in market. So if we have one advice to give to publisher, how should small to medium publisher pick one solution? How should they go about it? What should be the approach?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take that one. I think there's two things that, in my mind, publishers should be asking themselves. One is pretty obvious. Like, if you use an ID solution, to what extent is that going to unlock spend from advertisers? Can you unlock demand in a scaled way where you can implement once and you can have a lot of demand come your way because like if you adopt an ID solution that doesn't have that whole infrastructure built, it's going to be tough to get dollars from it, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, what is happening to your first party data as it's being sent through the ecosystem? Are you sure that email address isn't being used for other reasons downstream? Are you sure that the proper encoding is being done or encryption is being done to make sure that first party data isn't leaking, right? So those are the two big things you need to ask yourself as publishers when you're evaluating ID solutions.
Rick, do you have anything to add, or TK on that one?
That makes perfect sense. That's what my chief privacy officer was asking right away. You know what I mean? When I brought the ATS solution and the LiveRamp InMobi joint partnership, which I was super excited about because it cuts down on the amount of work I have to do, one joint point of integration. You know what I mean? I just saw it as an easier sell through, two major players working together. But yeah, my chief privacy officer, my CTO, they were all over it, and they asked those questions that Scott asked. And I was embarrassed, as in like, I was like, well, they're major players, so they got to be doing it right. But I would encourage everyone to do that homework, because if you have a robust tech team, they're going to ask that right away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sound biased and I'm going to sound somewhat self-serving, but we cannot do this. Our Unify is based on these premises, right? We know, working with publishers, that they are going to want to know this, right? It's nothing is guaranteed, right? They're not going to just say because they know Scott, they know TK, they're going to just, come on, they want to deep dive into this. So that's a lot of thought went into how do we, again, it ties back into that transparency, right? They want to know, where is this data going? Where is it living? Where is it breathing? What is it making? And they want to know that entire pipeline. And when we partnered and designed these things, we thought through that. And people should ask those questions. Deep dive, right? This is not purely a monetization decision, right? You have to recognize that is to Rick's point, right? Rick is convinced that we can do this, but he still needs an SDK developer to go implement it. So that is investment from tech. That is investment from platform. That is investment from user acquisition. So there is a full pipeline impact from a publisher perspective, and need to be recognized then.
Yep. I was not allowed to unilaterally make this decision, as Scott. We've been talking for almost a year now, but yeah, I think everyone's pretty comfortable with it at this point. But yeah, just be prepared that everyone's going to be involved in this conversation. So
amazing. Lots to take away, obviously. Thank you, Rick, Scott, and TK for your valuable insights and contribution to this fun discussion. So before we wrap up, I see we have a few questions from the audience. So we'll move to our Q&A session. Stuart, do you want to take over?
I would love to. Thank you, Cecilia. And again, Scott, Rick, TK, it's tough to end this conversation But I guess it could go on for months as we ultimately look at this. Listen, we want to take some questions from the audience, and we do have a number of them queued up. I do want to just invite our audience again, if you have a question for our speakers, anything having to do with privacy, with value exchange, with identifiers, just submit it through the question tool. You should see there on your screen. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 10, maybe 15 minutes or so. Let's see how it goes. Just want to also remind people, first off, today's webinar has been recorded, so I'm sure you've got colleagues out there who are dealing with the same challenge that you're dealing with. If you want them to check this out, when we send you that link to the on-demand version later this afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock, grab that link, share it with your colleagues, or better yet, have them register, and we will send them that link directly. So just simple as that. Look, that's really basically the only reminder I've got here right now. So let's jump into these questions. And I'm just going to start off with the title of this is obviously about iOS 14.5 and that world. And we're talking about the Apple side, but I know, the mobile world is a lot bigger than iOS. So open question here, and maybe, Scott, I'm going to start with you, but go in there. What about Android? Where do we need to be concerned there? Obviously, on a global level, Android is so much more pervasive, and it's still a good chunk of the U.S. market here as well. Right? Should you be planning again for similar privacy issues going on as in the Android world?
It's a good question. I don't really have a good take on whether or not we're going to be dealing with the same situation with Android. It may happen. I don't see any sort of end date or where it will happen. But what I can tell you is that lots of marketers, particularly app install marketers, are spending more money in Android right now since 14.5, right? Peaked in June. But I view this as really transitory, right? I mean, I think the same Android inventory has always been available to marketers, and yet marketers perpetually bought iOS. But let's be honest here, despite these privacy concerns, I think we're seeing users continue to want to get iOS devices. That's where the users are. That's where marketers want to spend. And I mean, ultimately, the budgets are going to go back into iOS, and so we really need to try to figure out a way to make that traffic as addressable and that traffic as attractive as to advertisers as possible. Because I don't necessarily see that dynamic shifting, I guess. That's my take on it.
Yeah, Rick, are you doing? Yeah, go ahead, TK.
No, I was just going to add to that. In that, so we actually agree with Scott in the budget shift, right? We see that, and I also think Scott, you're right on the money in that. At some point, when assuming what all the conversation we're having becomes effective, which is the intent, that some of those budgets will come back as addressability becomes better than what it is today, and that's the intent. But to your point, while there is no deadline that we have heard anything from the Android ecosystem, privacy will be a concern there as well, right? So I expect there will be some action that will get taken, whether it look and feel like the same that we see today, TBD.
Yeah. Rick, anything you want to add on from the publisher side? Did you just sort of see shift and spend over to the Android side, or?
We did. It's like I said, the wide ranges of opt-in rates also apply to the ranges of effective CPM and fill rate declines. I've gotten feedback, and I don't know if it's just because some people were on more of a delay, or they're not looking at it as closely because their business is more diversified across web and CTV. But we've had a few partners come back, or colleagues, peers, come back and say, hey, we're seeing 25 to 35% of the CPM we used to get, which to me is, super dramatic. Obviously, that's a large impact. We saw, I'm not going to quote actual numbers, but we saw a decline in fill rates, and that's mostly because we didn't want to budge as much on effective CPMs. We'd rather serve our users less ads than serve them ones that won't make us much revenue and may perhaps be lower quality. So we've been a little slower to drop our floors, I think, than some other people that we've spoken to. But that's up to you as a publisher to make that decision. But yeah, the impact has certainly been felt. It took a little bit. It was hard to discern whether it was just seasonality. Like, July, you always see, at least on my end, the last two companies I worked for, July was always the softest. So it kind of happened during a time where there were two things going on.
Right.
But yeah, we've definitely seen the impact. We've seen the lean in towards Android more. And, hopefully some of these identity solutions and moves towards contextual help us alleviate that.
Got it. So another question came in, and again, TK, I'm going to start with you, but I'm sure I know, Scott, you're going to have a lot to say about this one too. And again, this is, again, we talk a lot about companies here and all the ID solutions that are out there. Look, we've discussed the entire aviary of ID solutions and trends, but what we're talking about here is small mid-sized publishers. It's a Flipboard. You probably play in maybe the pool with a lot of larger people like New York Times or your Condé Nast background and stuff like that. But there are a large number of small ones. So when you have these sort of smaller publishers, how should they really know what to choose, right? How do they go about that? This is a really huge investment and a huge shift as it goes on. What do they really need to? Where do they need to be right now as they are making these choices? I guess that's sort of like the open question here for the small, mid-sized publisher.
Right. Listen, I think if you first start taking a look at what are some of the challenges that's come in the way, right, in terms of trying to make the decision, right? You have operational reasons, right? Somebody has to make sure it's getting coded. You want to make sure it's got privacy first. All your privacy first concerns are addressed, meaning somebody, you're going to have legal and privacy review of any solution that you choose. And you also want to see, okay, what is your consented traffic look like? What does your first party data look like? So if you think of smaller publishing houses, the medium-sized publishing houses, what are the easiest ways to tackle this problem, right? To go back to what we talked about earlier, transparency is very key. So when you have to make sure that any solution you choose can solve all of this, right? Again, going to sound biased given what T-shirt I'm wearing, but that's kind of how, when we started thinking about creating that unified solution, we thought about it, right? The paperwork, the legal paperwork is fairly straightforward, simple. You need to be able to, publishers to be able to read it, understand it, and be able to say, I know what they're doing with the data. I know when I share the data with a platform and it's going to a data partner, what they are going to do about it. The coding part, right? You've heard Rick mention this a couple of times. He cannot make this decision by himself. He needs to have buy-in from the CTO. He needs dev resources. What is the complexity of integrating such a solution? I can literally tell you, I understood the coding changes that came from Scott's team, right? And I can tell you, I don't sit and code every day. So you have to understand, does the solution address each of these challenges in a meaningful way and provide you with a comprehensive way to scale?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Scott nailed it before, and I piggybacked off of that to TK's point. But just like with anything on the ad tech side, I think it's test and learn, right? Like we've kind of identified who our first partner is going to be, and then we've gotten suggestions from others who might be a little bit ahead of us on other ones to explore. And it's going to be, set one up, see how that goes, try another one, see if it adds any incremental value or not. It's the same with kind of setting up your monetization stack, right? And I'm sure at some point there's diminishing returns. I'd imagine you hit diminishing returns much more quickly in this, scenario than you do with monetizing your ad inventory. But it's the same with our ad stack, right? Like we get to a certain point of direct integrations and then TAM and OB integrations, and we kind of say we don't need any more because We're basically just shifting from one to the other. So for us, we're going to start with the largest solutions out there, and then see if we need to add others as we go on or not.
Mm-hmm. Scott, anything you want to add on from the ID point of view?
Yeah, I don't think so. We covered this one a little bit in an earlier part of the discussion, so I think we're good.
So let's, another question came in, and I thought this was interesting, which is, we talked a little bit about, again, identifiable audience and identifiable inventory versus non-identifiable inventory. Are we ultimately going to see and this is someone asking, are we going to see sort of two types of, almost two different experiences within sites as we do this? And maybe, Rick, I'm going to send this one your way to start, which is, or are we looking at a situation where, again, and I know we've had discussions on this on lots of different webinars, where you're really looking as an advertiser at a layered approach, right? Where it's identifiable and you know certain things, you can begin to do your targeting. Where it is non-identified, you might be looking at a more contextual issue. Again, this is from someone who works for a large automobile company. You can well imagine, right, if you know someone's in the market because of identifiers and you've understood that from them, they're obviously targeted, but maybe you're looking at using Flipboard and, buying all the automotive aggregated content that goes through and coming in on that category, where, again, you're all about context. How does it go?
We do this contextually a bit, or at least have in the past. We have a strong technology, business decision maker, and financial services categories on Flipboard. And in the past, we have charged more for some of those things, typically on an IO basis. But if there's a way to do this better programmatically, particularly with the identifiable versus non-identifiable, and make it, a cleaner segment in the platforms themselves, then I think it's worth pursuing. We're going to do whatever we can to try and recoup, losses. So I think it's a logical thing to do. Unless I'm missing something, and if people out there, can show me how to do this, I'm all ears. But I think right now, our inventory just kind of goes into our various partners. It's segmented by our first party audiences or our first party contextual alignments, but it's not necessarily, to my knowledge, segmented as identifiable or non-identifiable in a very clear-cut way. Definitely something worth exploring from my perspective. So
yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is, and this is just sort of making this more human, right? So we all know that marketers want to buy people, and right. So I've got a kid that just went to college. I'm a homeowner. I've got a bunch of kids in middle school and high school. One's going to be a driver soon. It's really important for marketers to know these details about me so they can target me with various messages along the way of them trying to convert me to become a customer. And we just need to enable publishers to figure out when did I show up at their site, and how can I make that inventory, the fact that I'm there, that visit, available from an ad impression standpoint to buyers. And because it's the way that they want to buy, it's the way that they want to maximize their marketing spend. And it's really important for publishers to think about that.
Mm-hmm. I think I would just add to that. The only thing I'll add to that is the non-identifiable inventory doesn't just, we have to adapt how to make it identifiable, right? That's the key aspect of it. It's not, and there is value to it. And today we work with publishers in even trying out experiments along the lines of segregating identifiable and non-identifiable, and help them figure out how can you make it identifiable. So over time, that will evolve as well.
Okay. I think we got time for one more question if we answer quickly. And I thought this one was very interesting. And again, seeing what's been going on with iOS, seeing again the opt-in rates for being tracked across apps, and as they have been low in some circumstances, higher than maybe in others. But are you seeing differences, and maybe it's too early to tell, in user behavior in those who have opted in for tracking versus those who have not opted in for tracking? And what ultimately does that start to do for what I'm going to call the sort of the site or the app experience as we go forward? So go ahead, Rick. I see you unmuting, so all yours.
I wouldn't say we've necessarily seen changes in behavior. And now that you say that, I feel like I'm going to go back and talk to some people and see if we can track that better. We have seen differences in their background and profile, right? And like kind of alignments with, who they are and whether they're more likely to opt in or not. And I think, our opt-in rates have been sometimes tied to the fact that our users are educated, very educated, affluential, that whole kind of thing. And, sometimes on this front, that has posed more of a challenge. So I think we need to address our users differently than some people address theirs, and tailor our messaging differently. But as far as their behavior goes, I don't believe it's something we're tracking, and I'm gonna push on that after this. So I'll let you know later.
Gentlemen, as much as Scott and TK, as much as I would love to hear your response for this, we are out of time. And so I've got to sort of cut this short. So listen, I appreciate that. And you know what? Let me just, again, so we are getting to the top of the hour. Let's continue this. And again, we'll forward over the questions over to our sponsors at InMobi on this for the questions that came in that we didn't have a chance to respond to. For everyone out there, again, just some quick final reminders here. Webinar's been recorded, so again, check your email 3:30. We're sending you that link to the on-demand version. Adweek.com/webinars. Again, please, check it out. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. Check out the archive of on-demand webinars. So again, I want to thank our sponsors from InMobi. I want to thank our speakers as well. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day. Thank you to everyone, really. And we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Have a great day, all.
Thanks, everybody.